Abuse. It is something that some people feel is a generational curse. Can you argue with someone that abuse started when they were a young child and then ended up for over 20 years in a narcissistic, abusive relationship? How do you come out of that? What do you do when you do come out of it? You become a fabulous author and the voice for victims of narcissistic abuse everywhere. Join me as I talk with author and narcissistic abuse survivor Dana S. Diaz on this episode of True Crime, Authors and Extraordinary People.
Welcome to True Crime, Authors and Extraordinary People, the podcast where we bring two passions together. The show that gives new meaning to the old adage, truth is stranger than fiction, and reminding you that there is an extraordinary person in all of us. Here is your host, David McClam.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of True Crime, Authors and Extraordinary People. Of course, I'm your man, David McClam. Hey, if you guys haven't already, make sure you follow us on all of our social medias. One link to a link tree will get you every link you need to have pertaining to the show. Well, once again, folks, I find myself in that unique pickle of having an author, but also can fit the same bill as an extraordinary person. So let me tell you who our author is today. She studied journalism and psychology at DePaul University. While there's no better teacher than life experience, and she has had lifelong experiences with narcissistic abuse, her education did give her the ability to accurately verbalize and express how narcissistic abuse creates confusion and conflict within victims. Today, she is a proud voice for fellow victims who are unable, afraid, or ashamed to share their experiences. She strives to create awareness and understanding to ensure victims are given the support they need to first understand their situation and then begin the healing process. Her first book, chronicling her own abusive marriage that lasted nearly 3 decades, started as a journal that she hid under the couch cushion in the basement. When she isn't speaking out on narcissistic abuse, she can be found listening to music by Eric Hutchinson, Ellie King, Green Day, Amy Winehouse, Julia Michaels, and Taylor Swift. She equally loves her gray Converse shoes, which she wears them every day, and she probably has on right now, and her Toyota FJ Cruiser. Dana watches the sunrise and set every single day and enjoys hikes in the woods. She absolutely loves animals for their sensitivity and loving hearts and has 2 cats, Kitty Kitty and Tigger. And she makes her home in Illinois with her husband, Doug. She is the author of the best-selling book, Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. Please welcome Dana S. Diaz. Dana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is my honor and my pleasure to have you here today. I know that was kind of a lengthy introduction, but is there anything else about Dana that we don't know?
Probably not. If anyone read my book, I kind of lay it out there. The book was meant for other victims of abuse who, like me, thought they were alone. But honestly, the first meeting I ever had with my publisher, she said, we've all heard the husband's a villain and he's mean and he's abusive, poor wife. She's like, there's stuff about you. You're a nice girl. We like you, but it takes 2 to tango. And so I laid everything out. Even, we've all done shameful things, have mistakes, regrets, but everything is in that book, let me tell you. Although I've written 2 more books I'm in the process of publishing, so apparently there's more.
Busy.
Yeah, I try.
Well, I can certainly say that you're kind of like me. You have a wide range of musical choices.
Yeah.
The ones that we named here, do they have just a special place in your heart for you, or?
Yeah, it's actually, I'm not trying to be one of those promotional people that keeps referencing the book, but the first page of the book, before the book even starts, I kind of give a little blurb explaining when I was a little girl, because abuse started for me when I was born. But when I was a little girl, I found that, when I would try to tell my mother or any other adults about the abuse I was enduring from my stepfather, verbal and physical abuse, nobody believed me. And then my mother would tell me to keep quiet. Nobody wants to hear about it. You know, it was all hush hush. Polite society doesn't want to hear about unpleasant things. And when you're a little kid, they just say, oh, she's making stuff up. She's just trying to get attention. But I found my outlet was music, because when you have that all inside of you, there's a lot of, you're a little kid. You don't understand what mental health is. You don't know what narcissistic abuse is. You know, you're not being treated right. You know how you feel, and it doesn't feel good. But I found that I couldn't get in trouble if I listened to music, but it was the lyrics and the melodies, but especially the lyrics. So yeah, those artists that you mentioned, like, I mean, every day I've got my Amazon Echo right next to my computer here that I always have it going, and probably plays the same music over and over, but it's stuff that just speaks to my soul. And, everybody has their therapy or whatever, heals their soul. And for me, it's music, always has been.
It's the same for me. I'm a musician, but there's probably songs on my playlist that play 40 million times because they do something for me, especially in the right time, of a right state of mind, right?
Exactly.
Speaking of Taylor, I hope she uses her influence. There's a young man that got fired because he worked for a company for years, and they did the worst thing they could do to a Swiftie. They said, hey, today you're going to guard the front of the stage, but hey, look, you can't look at her. You can't turn around. So he goes to his social media and he says, hey, I can't use my phone at all this concert. So can somebody just take a picture of me when Taylor comes behind me? And of course, hundreds of his friends did that. And the company fired him and said that he breached the contract because he had this photo. So I'm hoping that Taylor comes out and gets
Swift.
Right. You can't put a Swiftie that close and, hey man, look, I'm gonna put you right here. She's gonna come within a couple of inches. Don't turn around though. I mean, that doesn't work out.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to control myself. I'd probably jump up on stage with her and just like hug her and freak out. I'm like the only 47-year-old Swiftie too, I swear.
No, there's a ton of y'all. There was that 2020 special when they had the big debacle about her tickets. I've never seen so many adults be mad in my life.
You know what, though? Again, it's just, I don't know if she's been with narcissists or, experienced some of the things I have. But, some of her songs, honestly, I don't like. But lyrically, she is an artist. She has a way with words. So I absolutely respect her for that. So, but yeah, huge fan.
Now, you've kind of touched on it a little bit, so I want to dig a little bit into it. You said that you started dealing with narcissistic abuse as a child. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually going to be the subject of one of the next books coming out, the prequel to the one that's out. And, I was born to a teenage mother. She didn't want me, and it's pretty well known. That's not just my idea of things. It's even talked about to this day, unfortunately, that I wasn't wanted, but the family thought she should keep me. But she got married when I was 7 years old. The man had been in our life since I was about 1 year old, and I never liked him, which is funny when they say kids can sense things about people. Never liked him. And I mean, like, I was repulsed by him, just something about him, and I couldn't put my finger on it. But again, I was just a kid, just trying to live my life. Once we moved in with him after they got married, it got much worse. It was just, narcissistic abuse is always insidious. It starts with little things. It was when I didn't listen, gripping me by my little scrawny arm or my ankle or something too tightly to where there were purple marks. The verbal abuse. It was always when nobody was ever around to hear it but me, but it started to become a daily occurrence of nobody ever wanted you. I shouldn't have to pay for you. You're not even my child. You're a burden. Your mother doesn't even love you. Nobody's ever going to, every day I'm hearing this. And I would stand up for myself. I was a very, very strong-willed little girl, but standing up for myself made the physical abuse worse because I wasn't supposed to talk back. That I was still Generation X. We're still raised with that idea that you respect your elders. And by respect, they don't actually mean respect. They mean you do as you say, or you do as you're told and say as you watch your mouth. And I didn't. And because I was I had to stand up for myself. Like I said earlier, I'd go to my mother, but she was always very emotionally distant from me because, she was responsible for me, but that was about the extent of our relationship. And so I just didn't have anybody. I knew that I couldn't speak up without consequences. So, I learned to keep my mouth shut, and I call it flying under the radar. I had to just, lock myself in my bedroom, and I would try having little friends over, and even, he was very mean verbally to them as well, and, would cut me down in front of them. I was always stupid and I didn't know anything and I'm incompetent and incapable. And, just this narrative about me. And even with family, if something would happen, it's like I would hear my mother and stepfather talk to family like I'm not in the next room, at holidays or celebrations or whatever. Oh, that she's so difficult. She's, just because I wasn't submitting to him, because I wasn't saying yes, sir. And, I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but I was being treated very badly. I mean, the verbal abuse was enough, but when you add the physical in, that was pretty rough. It was things like I remember once I tried to pick up the phone to call my mother at work because of the things he was saying to me, and he took the phone out of my hand and beat me over the head with it. Things like that, being drugged down the stairs by my ankles because I was running a little late, having the door removed from my bedroom and then straddled and punched and slapped, and for nothing that was really, nothing warranted that, and I always say, like, of course I'm biased because I'm me, but, I was a pretty straight arrow. I always tested very high in school. Even in first grade, they wanted to move me up 2 grades. I've never to this day smoked a cigarette. I could probably use some weed, honestly, but I've never done it because my anxiety's like sky high. But, I was a good girl is all I'm saying. I even tried to go to a party in high school and ended up calling a cab to go home because it just wasn't my thing. I was not one of those kids that went out and partied. So it's not like I did anything to, there's nothing in my mind that I could think would deserve treatment like that. But I just like to make it clear that I never was one of these kids. I was just going through life like everybody else. And it just was that I wasn't his. Even my mother, she was ashamed of me because I was a physical manifestation of her worst shame and her worst regret. And it was just really hard for me. So, I go out in the world. I couldn't wait to get out of their home when I was legally, 18 and able to be on my own. But unfortunately, I had a very skewed idea of what love looked like and what a relationship looked like. So I fell right for another narcissist, but a covert one that I didn't see coming because he was hiding behind this humility and this charming, very, sweet and just, it wasn't mean right from the get-go. So I had no idea. 25 years I spent with him, and that ended pretty badly.
Now, we're going to dig a little bit into that here in a minute, but I found something very interesting about you, that your grandmother said that she felt like that your family was cursed, kind of like a generational abuse.
Yes. My grandma, I've talked to her more now that I'm in this field, so to speak, in this realm. But, she had always felt like the women in our family, as strong-willed as we all are, tended to fall for these men who just mistreated us. Now, I'm going to say this, and I don't want anyone to be offended. I'm half Puerto Rican. My mother's side of the family is Puerto Rican. And so I was raised by them. So I definitely identify with the Hispanic culture. And I think as a culture, we tend to be mouthy and loud, but we are taught to serve the men. I mean, my great grandma, there was no sitting down to a meal until all the men and the children had their plates and their drinks and everything. Then us women can sit. There was a certain sense of, I don't want to say servitude, but of taking care of. We take care of the men and the children first. And that's how I was taught. And I don't want to offend anyone out there. I'm just saying what it is, at least from my experience and my family. So, I think that maybe that played into it, where you feel like you defer to the man, assuming it's a male-female relationship, because that's what you're expected to do. But you're still going to have an opinion, and you're still going to say what it is, and you're still going to be you. It's not that you're losing yourself, but unfortunately, some of us ended up in really bad situations. My grandma, unfortunately, in my blog, I talk a little bit about her, some of her experiences, but, I don't even call her husband my grandpa, because I only saw him a couple of times in my life. But he was awful to her. And, just a little snippet of my childhood that involves him. I don't recall this, but this was retold to me, that when I was maybe around 4 years old, he wanted to see me because I was his only grandchild, and he had a very serious alcohol problem. So everybody was nervous about that, but they thought, okay, he seems to be sober today, let him have her for the day, thinking I would be taken to the zoo or something, fun that a grandpa and a granddaughter could do. He took me to the bar, one of his local bars, and he left with a woman. That was not my grandma, obviously. And he left me there, a little girl in Chicago, at a bar by myself. Fortunately, because he was a local, they set me up on the bar stool with some orange juice, and somebody there said that they knew where he lived and took me in their car back to my grandma and grandpa's house. And fortunately, my grandma was there to receive me. But, these are some of the things that gives you an idea of what she was dealing with. But she had a really, really bad marriage that, to this day, it's very sad that it haunts her.
I can feel that, Bill, because like in African-American circles, we're not that far apart in age is the same way, especially those of us that's raised in the South. The woman takes care of the men and the children, and then they sit down and tend to themselves. At some point, being that both cultures on the Hispanic side and the African-American side can be quite mouthy. There becomes times, it comes times when you get through taking that and then you say something back you shouldn't, and it's followed by a fist. Like I told you, I'm also a survivor of childhood abuse. My mother was beaten profusely by my father. I've seen everything from chained to beds, thrown against walls, you name it. But then the thing on top of that is like a pattern. Every other man that she came across was either abusive or had a semblance of my dad. My dad was an alcoholic and a drug addict. So if it wasn't the guy that was beating her up, it was the guy that couldn't live without a bottle. Even though there was a couple of ones that she did meet that was good, but still we couldn't get out of that stigma. So I kind of feel where your grandma's coming from. And I think it followed me. I'm on my 5th marriage because of abuse from spouses. So I totally feel you.
Yeah. And I think that absolutely, because I've been interviewed so many times, and even people that know me, well, if it was that bad, why did you stay? Or how could you not see the red flags? Well, again, covert narcissists, you can't. And even regular narcissists, honestly, I mean, people think like if he did all this stuff, but we see him and he's nice, or he was at this, at the school and he didn't seem like he was a violent person no, well, of course not. Do you think I'd like to think that people would know that I wouldn't fall for like Chucky if I met him on the street, like they're not walking around like, looking like with butcher knives and disheveled hair and clothes. Like, no, they are trying to charm everybody, and they're trying to mimic normal, respectful, they're generous and they're funny and everybody likes them. They'll do anything for everybody, but except for that person at home, that's their target. But that's how they get you. That's how they lure you in. That's how they fool everybody. But how could I see it coming when, just like you said, I mean, I was used to somebody making me feel insignificant, unworthy, unlovable, like a piece of crap, basically. And he succeeded in doing that. And I allowed him to, unfortunately, for 25 years until I got sick. And, unfortunately, even after the divorce, that's when it got the most violent, and where I worried even more about my life. And I found out that he actually did indeed want me dead, that I was not paranoid like people were trying to make me believe. Yeah, there's a lot.
So let's talk a little bit about that. You met him, you spent 25 years with him. I mean, how did you meet him? And then when did all of the abuse begin with you?
Well, I worked in real estate. He walked into my office one day, and the irony is I thought he was a jerk. He reminded me very much of my stepfather. I thought he wanted servitude. He felt entitled to servitude, and I didn't give it to him because I'm like, no, I'm good. Have a nice day. But unfortunately we had, more contact after that. And, one night he invited me to his apartment to hang out. And I thought, I'd just come out of a long-term relationship with somebody that wanted to marry me. And I was just kind of still trying to get over that because I'm the one that said no. I just knew I could not spend the rest of my life with him. Somebody else who didn't treat me the best, cheated on me all the time. That was my main issue, minor details. So I thought, I like to be open. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe in a different, I'm able to kind of compartmentalize people. Like, maybe I don't like you at work, but maybe outside of work, we'd be cool. Like, there are those relationships that are like that. So I thought, well, it doesn't hurt to go hang out. Well, it was not a good night. It was not a good night. And there was he took advantage of me sexually. I didn't want to, but I didn't stop it. I mean, he spit beer on me. He talked about a girl that he had just, I guess now we call it ghosting, that he had led her on just to let her go, basically. And that concerned me. I mean, I felt like I hit the nail on the head with him. I did not misjudge him. He just had all these things to say. Like after all of this, we just started talking and having a normal conversation. It was very odd, very strange, but it felt like when he kind of sobered up, he was relating a lot to the things we were talking about. And I was telling him about like my past relationship and my mother and stepfather and all this. And he seemed like he was a black sheep too. And he's like, oh, it's the two of us against the world. And you and me were a lot more like that, So he was saying all these things. And you're talking to a 19-year-old girl who all I ever wanted was for somebody to love me. And I was told that nobody ever would. So yeah, I thought, okay, I could maybe get to know him and see what he's about. And then a week later, next thing I know, he's got me meeting his mom and dad, and they were like the nicest. I mean, it was Mr. and Mrs. Cleaver. And so I thought, okay, after meeting these people, there's no way I'm right about this guy. There's no way that a jerk could have come out of their house. Like they were literally the mom and dad that anybody and everybody would wish for. And I honestly, looking back, I think I fell in love with them. I wanted parents so badly, and I was young, I was naive. I'm not saying it's right, but it's just what it was, that I thought I'll get to loving him like that. We'll get there. I don't think love is this, isolated emotion that, people feel butterflies and stuff. That's attraction. That's excitement. That, I don't look at that as like love. I think that love grows over time, and there's so many aspects of it. But I was one of those people. I just thought, okay, it's not all that bad with him. Like we'll get there.
So let's ask the question that I'm sure everybody listening is like, wondering, after that night when he took advantage of you, I know the answer to this, but because I understand it, but let's help people understand it. Why at that point would you not just leave, never come back, and just chalk it up to this guy's just who I thought he was?
So, okay, I'm going to explain the psychological analysis that I have done on myself. And people that haven't been here don't understand it, and I'll do the best I can to explain it. Growing up, I was very smart. I have a pretty good IQ. Still to this day, my mother and stepfather tell me how stupid I am, and I don't know anything, and I'll never be anything. The only thing either one of them that had ever said good about me was that I was pretty. Only thing is, I didn't feel like I was pretty. So you put me in this situation with this man, and I'm not going to lie. What did I learn in high school and college? And, I was not a girl that slept around. I was a good girl, but what did guys want? If they found you attractive, they wanted to be with you. And I just took his eagerness to be with me, even though I felt like, I definitely in the moment, I did not want to do that. And I did not want it to happen. But like I said, I didn't stop it because I thought, okay, he wants me. Like I have been told I'm unwanted and unlovable. I'm a piece of crap. But I thought he has found worth in me. So even if it's just for my body and my appearance, and that's all it is, it was enough for me. And I'm sorry, like looking back, it makes me sad that that was my thinking 30 years ago. But that's what I was thinking. He wanted me, and it made me feel wanted.
Well, and the thing is, too, I call it a breaking technique, right? Because narcissists honed in on a person's weaknesses. And you don't even have to tell them what they are, right? They can just hone in on it just by looking at you. So if that is what he's thinking, I'm going to get her over here, nobody really wants her, I'm going to do this. She's not going to say anything. And then at the end, I'm going to still get her. This is what, like you said, people who have never walked this road, seen it at all, don't understand.
Right.
And it kind of irritates me because people, oh my God, she could have just walked out. She could have said no. The same thing with people, oh, you could have ran. You had to go to the grocery store. You got to think of the psychology of that. And
right.
There is fear, even if they don't come out directly and say, if you leave them, I'm gonna kill you. There is fear that is interwoven in the things that they say, how they put it, the looks, the way they act. They don't got to come out and say, if you disappear, I'm going to find you. When I do, you're going to get it. Just by the near certain words or things they say conveys that.
Yes.
And even in your mind, when you're in the middle of a grocery store, you can see a FBI and a cop standing there. You're like, man, you know what? I could tell them right now, he'll go to jail. But what happens if it don't work out the way that I want it to? What's going to be the aftermath of that? And that's what I'm glad you're here. I've had other guests on the show, and I always try to convey this, is that it's not as easy to leave as you think. And you can't judge people if you've never walked in that
Exactly. And that's the comment. Now that people have read, the story of that marriage, read the book, I have gotten a lot of questions of, well, if it was so bad, why didn't you leave? Why did you stay? Well, my obvious answer is, it's a nice idea. Just like when people say, oh, if my husband or wife cheated on me, I'd be out of there. Well, guess what? You know how many times he cheated on me before and after we were married? And guess what? You know what? And it's not that easy. You don't always have the financial ability. There's kids involved. We had a son together. I thought I was doing the right thing by staying for my son. Then there's the spiritual beliefs. If you're a spiritual person, I was born and raised Catholic. You don't get a divorce. You stay, you stick it out. You made the choice to marry him. And honestly, I did. And I firmly believed, I knew who he was. I still married him. I still had this child with him. We built a life. We're going to stick this out. We're going to make the best of it. And, there were a million other reasons. And fear was another one. Fear for me, because as time went on, it just got worse and worse and worse, to the point where when you're in like a fight or flight mode, I'm sure people have heard this term where you're so scared that your heart's racing, you're sweating, you're panicking, either that you're going to get ready for a fight. They say it's similar to like getting ready to fight a lion that's chasing you, or you're going to run. And I'm a runner. I literally and figuratively. That's all I've got. I'm like all of 100 pounds and 5'3". I'm little. I can't fight. I run. So, and I do. When I see trouble with a person, a situation, I'm out. I'm not playing around with that. And just because I it's my way of guarding myself. But with him, unfortunately, feeling spiritually, financially, because of our family, all these things. I felt stuck there. And so I lived with all this fight or flight stuff. I just was always panicking. So cortisol, which is the stress hormone that's running through your body, like adrenaline, when you're in that fear, I had so much of it running through me that it eventually made me sick and gave me a lung disease and all these autoimmune flares and everything else, that by the time I got sick and was diagnosed, I just said, that's it. My body, the doctor told me my body was shutting down. I have a little oxygen machine. It's ridiculous, the things that I dealt with. They said it's like having COPD and fibromyalgia all at the same time. And it was because of living in fear. And I just said, that's when I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. But unfortunately, he didn't like that. Didn't work for him.
And I'm assuming that even though he started this beforehand, did things get worse for you after you got married?
Oh, absolutely. Once we got married, I was absolutely his. That wedding ring, that was, I always say it was like my leash, that was my leash. And then when technology came out with like all the cell phones, smartphones, GPS technology, then the video doorbells, all this stuff, everything I did was monitored. At one point, I was positive I even had a GPS on my vehicle, but I couldn't, I couldn't be like under my car, like looking for it, because that would be obvious. He obviously knows I have no business under a car. I'm not one of those girls that knows how to change oil. So yeah, I was very well monitored. And if I veered off of anything that I should or shouldn't be doing according to him, I was made very well aware of it. But he also drank a lot every night. And that's when things would get really bad. So it was hard to sleep. I always slept kind of with one eye open. And then after we had our son, it got even worse because he didn't like that now I was giving all my focus and attention to this newborn baby and not to him. And I mean, I'm talking immediately within the first couple weeks, he did not like that when he picked up our son, his son would scream until I was holding him. He wanted mom. Well, he was in my belly for 9 months. I'm the only voice he ever heard. Narcissists tend to isolate people. I should make that clear to the audience. So over time, they don't like your family. So you stop going to your family events, even holidays. They don't like your friends. They make it difficult, guilt you. It's not good if you have friends. So I was at the point where I couldn't go out anywhere. Even if I went to the dollar store for some cat food, I was gone too long. I was screwing somebody. All these accusations. God forbid I talked to a friend on the phone. He didn't like me talking because he was trying to watch TV. And if I tried to text anybody, I was hiding stuff from him. I was screwing somebody. It was all this stuff. I couldn't even go to Sunday mass at my church without him accusing me of going there to screw the old man priest. Everything was an issue. So it just got easier to not do anything. I went to work and I came home. The end. I didn't go anywhere once I got home. I didn't talk to anybody. No family, no nobody, no friends. I just stopped. I was his wife and I was my kid's mother. And that was that. And he didn't even like me reading books or being on the computer on the internet. He did not want me influenced by the outside. He just wanted to keep me. He even told me at one point that our house was my prison and that I better get used to it. So that was my life. So I didn't try to do anything, and again, with now with these Blink cameras and the Ring doorbells, he was watching every move I made. And I would get text messages. Oh, you're home 5 minutes later than you normally are. What did you do? Where were you? All this stuff, harassing me all day with texts at work. It's a lot. And that doesn't even cover, like I said, At home, things were volatile, especially when he drank. I locked him out once because he was scaring me he would get very hostile and aggressive. He liked to kind of, I don't know how you call it, kind of like when a goose comes at you with their, wings out at the side. That's like how he always like puffed up his shoulders and his chest and would like try to intimidate me with his size. And I locked him out one night because he was scaring me, and he tried to break in with a crowbar, and I was afraid that he was actually going to break. It was a glass door that we had going into our house. I was actually afraid he was going to break it because, it was almost flexing. I could see it, and he was so angry. So I thought I better just open the door. And he bust in and he swung the crowbar at my head, and I ducked just in time. And I have very slow reflexes, so I don't know how I missed that, but I would have been dead. No doubt. I would have been dead. And, there were other things that happened too, but it was not safe there. But when you're not safe, you're scared to leave. You don't just leave. And I wasn't going to leave without my kid. And he had always threatened that I would never see my son again if I tried to leave. So I stayed.
And that's always the case, right? They threaten with a kid or an animal. Even now, restraining orders, it asks you have pets and where do you want the pet to go?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, my dad was the same way, except for he was in the military. He was in the Marines. Perfect for narcissists because the fact since they moved us, he didn't have to do it. And that's another thing. Narcissists like to move you. So you're far away from anyone that you have contact with.
Oh, yeah.
And so we end up being moved to South Carolina because that's where they stationed him. And because, like you said, of all the technology, I can tell you the one tech giant that's trying to do something about that is Apple. They've built in certain things into their phones. There's one called Safety Check now. So if you were in a narcissistic relationship where the man decided or the woman decided they didn't know where you were, now you hit a button, it totally eliminates that, takes them out, clears them out. Air tags was the number one question. Well, can we track people with them? No, they put safeguards so that you can't track a person because they probably figured that's what people's going to do.
Right.
And I do think that these tech giants, these tech companies, more of them need to do more things too to do safeguards like this. But yeah, I have ring bells and cameras outside my house, not to spy on my wife, but because I have neighbors around here that like to do mischievous things. But I've read other cases where people's like, yeah, he has a camera pointing right inside the house. He can see everything I'm doing. So the moment I move, he knows. So that had to be a very scary time for you. So after all of this time, you went through all of this abuse. At what point did you finally pop up and say, this is it, no more, I got to get out of here?
Well, like I said, I think it was when I was diagnosed, which was towards the end of 2019. I had been diagnosed with upper airway resistance syndrome, which, like I said, is like having COPD and fibromyalgia all at the same time. I had been to every specialist. I'd been to so many doctors. None of them really knew what to do with me. And, they just wanted to throw a pill at each symptom, but that wasn't going to solve the problem. It took Mayo Clinic running the cortisol test. And in fact, they thought they compromised the sample because my levels were so high, they had never seen them so high, that they ran the test again just to confirm that my cortisol levels were indeed that high. To give people an idea, your cortisol levels are tested 5 times if you have a cortisol test at different intervals throughout a 24-hour period. At any one of those intervals, your levels should be somewhere between 100 and 600 or 700, and mine were consistently over 2,500. So my body basically thought like there was a cancer or something in me that it had to eradicate. And so it was basically killing itself. It was depleting. My white blood cell count just fell to autoimmune rates. I was having I had 2 or 3 dozen symptoms every day that would plague me. It was really awful. But since I've been out of that situation, I'll never be healed fully, but I'm healthier, because at one point during that time too, this turning point for me, in a 2-week period, I had dropped so much weight. I was only 93 pounds and I was skeletal and my skin was gray. And I couldn't breathe. And it took the doctor sitting me down and saying, Dana, your levels, everything in your body, every major organ, is just shutting down. You are at base survival rates. Your body's doing everything just to breathe and keep your heart beating. And he said, I cannot tell you what to do, but your life circumstances have got to change. Otherwise, you will die. And that's a scary thing to hear when you're just in your early 40s and, you think you have more than half that time left to live. And I had a kid. I wanted to see him grow up. And, just the idea of him being left with his dad was enough to give me the will. And I just said, I had to finally actually respect myself enough and love myself enough to say, okay, screw you. I got to take care of me. And that means getting out of this situation. So, yeah, unfortunately, when I talked to an attorney and had a little homework to do before I could file for divorce, we went into the shelter in place during COVID. And then I was stuck in a house with him for how many months. But fortunately, when the shelter in place was lifted, like a typical narcissist, he had caught on that I wasn't messing around anymore. I was done with him. And so he moved out in the middle of the day without telling anybody, and told everybody that I was harassing him and abusing him. So he had to leave. He couldn't sit down and have a talk, and there was no working it out. He had to leave me. And I was like, you know what? I don't even care what people think. Let them think what they want. I'm done. I'm out. Now I don't have to fight to get him out of the house. So good for us.
Well, now you got out of that marriage. We do know that you're married again.
Yes.
Not too long of a span. You're talking about 3 years here. What made you want to marry your current husband, Doug? What's different about that? And how did you decide that you want to do that again after coming out of 25 years of abuse?
Honestly, I didn't want to ever get married again. And it wasn't because I was like, shunning love and marriage. I didn't have I was just like, I knew, my body needed to heal. I needed some space and time. I still had to get my kid through his last year of high school and get him through technical school. I had started writing the book. I was just like, it's me time. But my husband, I'd known him a very long time. I was friends with his sister-in-law for probably 15, 16 years. I should say we live in a small town. So it's one of these towns where everybody knows everybody. So I'd known his family, many of them, his dad, his sister, for years. My son grew up with some of my husband's nephews. They're still very close friends. So it wasn't like I went to the bar or went on a dating app and met the guy. We already knew each other, and he had actually been a really tremendous support to me through the end of at one point he felt like he needed to just remove me from the situation before, because he saw my health withering and he cared about me and didn't want to see me go down that road. But no, when he made his feelings known, certainly I'd always liked him very much, but I'm one of those people like, crappy marriage or not, I was still legally married. So I just put my blinders on, like, yeah, we'd be great together, but like, no, I'm not trying to be that girl, and you don't want to be with that girl. So let's just not go there. And he was very, very respectful of that. But once everything was done and over with, to be honest with you, it was after my ex became the most violent within a 3-day period. And this was after the divorce. Within a 3-day period, my ex had shown up on my doorstep in the middle of the night with a knife the one night. And the second night, he was screaming insults and shot a gun a few times outside my bedroom window. And then I had to go through the courts and everything. They would not give me an order of protection. It was all this other rigmarole. But that's when my now husband, Doug, kind of stepped in, and he said, honestly, that just all scared me so much. I thought I was going to lose you. So I just want you to be my wife. And so we decided, we talked about it, I'm like, I don't need to be married again, and neither do you. We can just be really good friends. But you know what? We sat down, I think later in life, and you could probably relate to this because, you've been married, remarried, is that you're not 20 or, 30 or whatever age. It's not your first marriage. You have an idea about what you want your life to look like. And does this person complement that? And is that what they want? Because you don't you don't need to get married again, and you don't need to mess around with, baloney or getting the. But we both wanted the same thing, and we are very happy together. I'm very glad that I finally said yes to him.
Well, I wish you the best with that. Yes, I've been married and divorced. I go on several podcasts now to tell my story because with you being Hispanic as well, and on the men's side of that, we don't talk about the abuses that's happened to us.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about that because many men go through it.
Yes.
But in my case, I got married when I was 19 for the first time because I wanted to prove that I could be a good husband and that there was somebody out there that would do what my dad didn't. And of course, I just jumped in from one to the next to the next. And then finally, about the fourth one, I'm like, I'm done. And then I met my current wife now, and I'm like, I've been married 4 times. Here's what all happened. And here it is. And we got married. So I wish you and Doug the best because now we just celebrated 21 years of marriage together in August.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. So it does work, but with people like us, I keep saying this on every podcast when I have someone like you on, is because it's true. Amanda Blackwood was just on the show. We said the same thing. We are broken people, and we're always going to be broken to a degree. We just have learned how to heal ourselves and how to cope. And when we get partners, our partner needs to understand that for the rest of our life, because of what we've been through, we're going to be broken. If you're signing up for that, you have to know what you're getting into. And what Doug being able to see what you was going through on that level and still wanting to marry you, it truly is because he loved you and wanted to protect you. And I know you guys would be great for many years to come.
Yeah, he is exactly what I needed. But thank you for saying that, because that's a thing a lot of people don't understand. And I've been trying to talk a little about that too, is loving after trauma. It is possible. And people say, no, you need all this time to heal. You should go through all this stuff first. You should be alone for a certain amount of time. There's nothing I just don't believe that. I think it depends on the person. And honestly, Doug has helped me heal more than I could have healed on my own, because healing is a rough thing to go through when you are voluntarily putting yourself back in places that you wish you didn't remember, and you're having to feel all that stuff all over again and really rip it apart to get to the root of it. That's some nasty stuff. It's not fun, and it takes a long time, and it takes a very gentle, patient, understanding, and truly sensitive and loving human being to hold your hand through that. And without him, honestly, I know it sounds silly, like I'm biased because he's my husband, but I honestly don't think I could have done it without him. If I had gone through a lot of that healing therapy by myself, I'd probably be in fetal position in the corner crying, still thinking nobody would ever love me or want me. And he reminds me every day, even on the days that I don't like myself, because I have them, he's like, yeah, you're not my favorite today, but I still love you. And I need that validity. I need to hear that, because for so long I heard something else. And so he helps me with my self-talk and my self-love. And I just adore the man. He's amazing. And I'm glad that you found your person too.
Well, thank you. And I always say, that's why I say that people like yourself are very brave to come on a podcast or want to write a book, because I've said this to others before. Every time you come on a show, whether it's a podcast or you write a book or you talk to somebody about it on the street, we have to relive that to a degree. And nothing was more prevalent to that than the guest I've coming on pretty soon, whose daughter committed suicide at 15 last year. And you can just see it.
Yeah.
And the thing is that's what I try to tell people, is that every time they tell this story, they're reliving that to a large degree, whether we've healed from it or not. It's just trauma we always will know and remember. You say that now that he's gone, you're remarried. What happened to your ex-husband? Is he still around bothering people, or did he finally move on?
Oh, yeah. Well, he finally stopped bothering me when he found another gal that he moved in, just like me. I was moved in within 6 weeks. I think it took 2 months for her to move in, but that's fine with me. As long as he's got somebody else to distract him, he leaves me alone. But My husband laughs. I always say we all got to just stay in our lane. So that's all I'm trying to do. I'm going to stay in my lane and mind my business. It's their relationship is their business. Everybody's a grown person. They make their choices for whatever reasons. And just because I will say this too, even after everything he has done to me, I cannot sit here and say he would be that way in every relationship. The two people in every relationship have a different dynamic. Whether she's it or not, I can't tell you. Don't know, don't care, honestly, because it's off of me. But if he found somebody and they're good, great, fabulous. But I do think about them often because she brought her 2 daughters in that house with her. And I pray every day that they don't ever have to endure anything near what I did.
I do too. You know, my mom always raised me and said, you have to believe people can change. I have my thought patterns on that. I have interviewed somebody, same thing. I asked her the question, do you think he's the same way? And she's like, no, he's totally different with this one. But he took digs at her, right, and came back and said, well, you deserve this. And she doesn't. Again, trying to gaslight, right, the situation of what you did.
Right.
Why should people go out and get a copy of Gasping for Air and read that?
Well, if you have ever been in any kind of toxic relationship, if you got any issues with people that are narcissists, you will be able to relate to it. That is the reason I wrote the book, but I also wanted people to understand the physical consequences of it. But I will also add that I have met some mental health and legal professionals who read it and said that it has helped them to have a perspective, of an accurately verbalized perspective on the mentality of a victim of abuse, because they're trying to help people that are still very much in it and just don't always have the self-awareness or the ability to express what they're going through. So, you know, it's helpful to a lot of people, but I've also been told that even if you just want a good book about a really awful, awful relationship, that it's a fast read, it's a good read, it's exciting. I wish I could think that of my life. I didn't think it was exciting so much as devastating and damaging, but hey, you know, entertainment's good too. So definitely something I've had men and women read it and get something out of it. So give it a shot.
Well, what's next that we can look forward to from Dana S. Diaz going down the line?
Oh, Dana's a busy girl. So Dana has her website, danasdiaz.com. My blog is on there. I try to post a blog every month. I've been on this podcast tour. I've been on about 24 podcasts, and I think I have over 20 in the next couple weeks. So talking about various aspects of narcissistic abuse, you know, anywhere from motherhood to miscarriages to toxic relationships to the financial abuse, sexual abuse, everything in between. I'm also being urged to start a YouTube channel. So we'll be looking for that sooner than later. Lord knows I've been given the gift of gab, so that shouldn't be too hard for me. And I am in the process of publishing the prequel and sequel to Gasping for Air. The prequel will talk about my childhood and the abuse I experienced there. And the sequel will be, I'm getting pressured by people that have read Gasping for Air that they want more. They want to know what happens next. So that is definitely coming as well within the next year.
Well, man, I thought I was busy. I think you got me beat.
I try. I got like the Rocky theme in my head every morning when I get up. I get to it. Got to get something going.
Well, Dana, I thank you gratefully for coming on the show. It has been enlightening. You've added so much to this narcissistic abuse conversation. I've had several other guests on here, and each one of you guys that come on here brings something different to the table. You are definitely a brave woman, and the door is open. If you ever want to come back on the show, you always have an open invitation.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I'll definitely reach out when the next 2 books come out. We'll meet again and have a conversation.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, guys. That was the fabulous Dana S. Diaz. You can learn everything you need to know about her on my website, truecrimeandauthors.com. Also at her website, which will be linked down below. You can also get your copy of Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse at Amazon and any place you can find books. And if you are a member of Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. I always remind you of this. Dana does not get credit just for downloading it. You do have to turn the pages. So let's get that book, let's read it, and hopefully it can heal people out there. All right, so guys, I thank you once again for tuning in. I know you have many options in true crime interview podcasts. I'm grateful for the last year you have chosen me. Hope you're being safe and good to yourself and each other. And always remember, always stay humble. An act of kindness can make someone's day. A little love and compassion can go a long way. And remember that there is an extraordinary person in all of us. I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Join us on social media. One link to the link tree has it all. Feel free to drop us a line at truecrimeandauthors@gmail.com. Cover art and logo designed by Arslan. Sound mixing and editing by David McClam. Intro script by Sophie Wild and David McClam. Theme music, Legendary by New Alchemist. Introduction and ending credits by Jackie Voice. See you next time on True Crime, Authors, and Extraordinary People.